What's going on, fellow A-plussers? It is I, your host as always, Adam Perez, coming through once again with a brand new video for you guys this evening as we're going to be getting into Chapter 4 of the Book of Boba Fett titled The Gathering Storm, or as I personally like to title this episode, Breaking and Entering and Tribe Mentality, as we got to see both on deck here in this episode as we not only get to focus on Boba, but really the spotlight, if you ask me, for this week's episode definitely goes to Fennec Shand, played once again by the amazing Ming-Na Wen, who winds up getting some spotlight in this week's episode. So thank you very much, guys, for certainly joining us. Listen, if you've got any thoughts on this particular episode of Boba Fett, let your thoughts be known in the live chat. Definitely will add to the discussion aspect of this episode, or some comments after this particular video winds up airing. If you want to go ahead and let your thoughts be known in the comment section box below, because remember, at the end of the day, these are just my A-plus opinions, but I definitely always want to know yours. What do you guys think of chapter number 4 of the Book of Boba Fett? Let your thoughts certainly be known, as we're pretty close to this season wrapping up. It's been a limited series. We only get about 6 episodes so far, so only 2 more to go, but you can definitely tell the crime war, if you will, is certainly starting to blossom. It would not surprise me if next week's episode or even the finale, we wind up having sort of the war, maybe a battle on the streets of Tatooine for supremacy of Tatooine to kind of see who certainly owns the rights. It definitely has that feeling of like an outside intruder with the Pike Syndicate in here, really trying to make their move on Tatooine, right? Not only, taking all the spice and, using it certainly to their benefit sort of thing, but it feels like they're really trying to wiggle their way in regards to controlling really all of Tatooine, and kind of taking, I guess, the people that live on that particular planet, really trying to push them aside and kind of take certainly what's theirs. And so I kind of really dig the idea that Boba Fett is one of those things. It's like, we need to take back certainly what's ours, right? I think the relationship between Boba and the Pike Syndicate, going back to the flashbacks, I think certainly has a lot to do with it, right? Like, one of the things that we speculated in the previous episode was the idea when the Pikes wind up telling Boba that they've got to deal with the Pikes also, right? In regards to the Dune Sea and all that stuff. And, Boba's mentions like, listen, I'm going to go ahead and take care of them for you guys. The idea that they tell us the speeder bike gang is the ones that wind up destroying the Tusken camp, I find that a little bit unbelievable. One of the things that I mentioned in the previous episode was it wouldn't surprise me if it was actually the Pikes, or maybe the Pikes paid the speeder bike gang to go ahead and destroy them, whatever the case may be. But I did find it interesting that even in this particular episode, Fennec Shand doesn't believe that it's the biker gang that took out the Tuskens, right? Like, they would almost be no match for the Tusken Raiders. So to believe that they were the ones that did it, I definitely a little bit of disbelief, even for me as the viewer. So I'm glad to see that one of the characters is certainly on board. So I'm kind of under the impression that maybe he eventually finds out that, yes, it's the Pikes that actually hired them to kill them, or the Pikes themselves, to get a little bit of payback on what happened, maybe when it comes to the sand bullet train that they wind up heisting up a couple of episodes ago. So we'll see, because it feels like it's kind of coming full circle with the Pikes and his situation in the past, and now kind of trying to take over all of Tatooine as well. So I really love that idea that Boba kind of wants to take back what rightfully belongs to them, and then really kind of spreading the wealth, if you will, to the other people that have their own territories when it comes to Tatooine as well. Really great sort of round table dinner that they wind up having in this episode too, that I honestly had a real kick out of. The idea of having a Rancor really does go a long way in kind of proving your point, or at least showcasing the idea that you're more formidable than they probably want to give you credit to, right? Like, put some respect on my name, or I'll feed you to my Rancor beast sort of thing. So I thought that was like just a really like big dick move, right, to kind of show you who's really in charge here. So I thought that was pretty funny, and even seeing Fennec Shand kind of give the little smirk too, knowing that was probably all part of Boba's plan. So I really like the meeting that we wind up getting with all the other syndicates, and whether or not he mentions like can they be trusted. We'll see. I guess you can trust them as far as you can kind of throw them mentality. But it does make me wonder, when Fennec at the end of this episode asks, how big is your treasure chest? Like, how much money do you certainly have left? When Boba realizes, like, hey, we're going into this by ourselves, right? Like, it's probably me, you, Fennec, Chrysanthemum, I'm assuming, which I'm so glad that he paid him to finally come and work for him, sort of thing. Like, hey, if you got that much animosity and anger still inside of you, Black Chrysanthemum, let's go ahead and put that to use here. So I expect him to definitely stick around and help Boba out in the final fight. So that's three people. You got the two Gamorrean guards, so that's five, and then you've got your swoop bike gang, which I think is maybe like, what is it, four other gang members or something like that. So you're probably going to need a little bit more muscle than that. So it will be curious to see who Fennec winds up bringing on board. I'm keeping my fingers crossed that it's a Cad Bane maybe appearance. I've been really wanting to see a live action version of Cad Bane. We don't really know what his final fate certainly is, or because I believe the storyline that they had for Clone Wars with Dave Filoni and George Lucas, even though I believe the concept art and things like that, or might have animation might have been kind of put together, with it not being aired, I do wonder if they'll take sort of liberties in changing up that storyline and maybe doing something a little bit different with it. Like, it would be interesting to see Cad Bane come alongside because Boba's got the money and Fennec maybe asks him for a favor, right? When it comes to bounty hunters and assassins, you got to think that they all maybe hang out in the same group. So I'm keeping my fingers crossed, right? There's also been rumors of a Han Solo appearance, perhaps, with Harrison Ford maybe coming back and being de-aged to certainly play the character again. I don't know if that's the type of muscle, him and Chewie, that he's trying to bring back in also to kind of help team up and face off against the Pikes. But I am interested to see exactly what that money will certainly bring in when it comes to muscle at the end of the day. Quick comment here. Marcelino Vasquez says 7 episodes in total. I was under the impression that it was 6, but listen, I'll certainly take 7 as well. You also say, hopefully the Pikes have some real bounty hunters fighting for their side instead of just generic grunts, so that way the fights will be more interesting. Possible. Maybe they have some hired help of their own, especially if they're trying to take on all of Tatooine. You said, I heard some people say that even Tamora Morrison hates the show, believing that this isn't Boba Fett. Has he said something like that recently, or just people trying to cause drama? It feels very much like people are certainly trying to cause drama. I feel like I've actually have seen an article where Boba along, or I should Boba, Tamora, and even Ming-Na Wen have really kind of defended the show, especially episode 3 with all the bright bikes that we wind up having, right? So no, I don't believe I've ever read anything where Tamora shows that he hates the show, sort of thing, right? I've actually seen the opposite. So people always like to kind of cause drama, if you will. That kind of reminds me of the whole Mandalorian situation, right? With the main actor that plays Mandalorian. Homeboy's never on set, hardly ever under the helmet and stuff. I've been hearing speculation forever that he's not happy with the show, type of thing, yada yada yada. I don't believe everything that I certainly read in that regards, Marcelino. So I'm pretty sure Tamora and Ming-Na Wen are fully on board with their character and the direction that the show is going. And speaking of the swoop bike gang, right? The idea of Chapter 3 really causing a controversy among fans in regards to the idea that this type of stuff doesn't belong in Star Wars, if you will. Talking about it doesn't fit the aesthetics of Tatooine and all that other stuff. Well, I love the fact that they kind of get highlighted again in this episode when we see Boba taking Fennec to a cybernetic sort of. It almost looks like a tattoo shop, but it's for cybernetics. If you ever need to get enhancements, they got themselves a doctor in there that's certainly helping and saving people and adding, whatever else cybernetics to human beings as they can. And if you look at it, I mean, one, the music is kind of raging, right? It definitely has like that punk metal vibe to it a little bit. You even see a couple of people hanging out outside with some really cool and interesting technology, along with more swoop bikes that tend to be, bright and sort of customized, if you will. And so for me, the idea that they're revisiting this type of thing, for me, it just kind of continues to show that there's always going to be a place for something in Star Wars. Just because of the fact that it feels kind of odd or out of place doesn't necessarily mean that there's anything wrong with it being there. Like, just because we're not certainly used to it. I said in my notes, I says, it just because it's different doesn't mean that it doesn't belong, right? There's always certainly a backstory. And for me to kind of see that there's more people on Tatooine with these cybernetic enhancements and things like that, I can imagine like, look, if I'm upgrading myself, why wouldn't I want to upgrade my swoop bike, right? And because of the fact that Tatooine does tend to be so, dreary, and well, I don't want to say dreary because the sun's out all the freaking time. But everything's like just rusty and rustic and just depleted and things like that. The idea of having like some uh teenagers or some punk ass kids that want to ride around town and in like their Cadillacs that are like bumping. It reminds me of like California to a certain extent. Also, like just because it doesn't feel like it doesn't necessarily belong or doesn't seem like it fits doesn't mean that it doesn't necessarily belong there. And so I kind of like the idea of them showing a different side of Tatooine, that there's always a backstory to something that we might not necessarily see. But there's definitely a story there. And I would love to know how kind of this gang wind up getting started on the outskirts of Tatooine like that. So again, I don't have a problem with it whatsoever. But I am glad that they at least um, showcase the cyborg swoop gang again, and just to really kind of see how it fits in this particular world of Tatooine. Because again, just because it's different doesn't mean it doesn't belong. There's always a reason behind it. But outside of that, for me, the Fennec Shand stuff, I really enjoyed here this week. Again, the issue with this show, I think, is really just trying to have a nice balance of past and present. And some people really love the present stuff. Some people love the flashbacks, like myself. Sometimes we probably wish we saw more of the opposite. You know what I'm saying? At some point in time. So that is definitely a real challenge when you are a limited series, having so much story to tell. And how do you certainly balance that out? But one of the stories that I was fascinated in learning a little bit more about was the Fennec Shand situation. The fact that they go back to the Mandalorian ending, where the post credit scene where we see, the feet walking towards Fennec's body, getting to see that showcased and highlighted again in here, and really seeing that moment when he saves her life, brings her on board, gets his ship back, and really brings us back to the moment of them, getting into Jabba's palace and finally sort of taking the throne. So for me, it was really cool to kind of see how everything came full circle. And I was kind of curious as to how exactly Fennec Shand wind up surviving that particular moment. And now we see she also does have cybernetic enhancements that wind up sort of bringing her back to life as well, if you will. I'm assuming she's not full android, definitely still has some body parts to her. But Fennec Shand certainly appreciative of the idea that she is definitely alive. And I wouldn't necessarily call this a life debt that she certainly owes to Boba, but I am glad the idea that he's at least allowing her um loyalty, I believe, is what he refers to it as, right? That I can offer you something that all these other people that you can go out there and get jobs for aren't going to provide for you, and that is in fact loyalty. And so the fact that there is some appreciation for saving his life, seeing what Boba is certainly capable of, as they went ahead and took out Jabba's palace in order to get Slave One back, sort of thing. She wants to go on the ride, and I think she's got something. Maybe she feels she's got something good. Like for me, I'm really hoping that she doesn't try and turn her back on Boba based off of everything that these two characters have definitely been through. But for me, it was pretty cool to kind of see them working together and why they get along as well as they certainly do, right? I think there's definitely a great understanding between these two characters. And I really enjoyed the infiltration of Jabba's palace. Some really cool sort of droid designs in here. Also, the little chef that's like chopping up everything. When Homeboy gets confronted by Boba, he does his best like General Grievous impersonation with his kitchen knives as all six of his hands start like spinning around and stuff. It just reminded me of like the General Grievous and Obi-Wan Kenobi fight from Attack of the Clone, or was it Revenge of the Sith? Yeah, Revenge of the Sith. That's exactly what it reminded me of. And even the little droid that we wind up getting, for some reason, I don't know why, the droid reminded me of like Dobby from Harry Potter for some reason. But I'm assuming this little guy was like the rat catcher, that they thought maybe there was a rat in the kitchen. Maybe they called for backup because homeboy, little guy comes in with like a little catching net and stuff. So I was wondering if he is in fact the rat catcher for Jabba's palace. But really cool little droid design, honestly. And had a little bit of a chuckle seeing Boba try and chase him around, sort of thing. But getting to see just Fennec in her um in her environment as an assassin, taking out, guards and things like that inside of Jabba's. A pretty great sharpshooter, man. Just knocking them off certainly one by one. Even the hand-to-hand combat as she's fighting people on the bridge to the ship for or the I should say the ramp to the ship for the Slave One sort of thing. So I'm really glad that Ming-Na Wen got the opportunity to showcase what she can definitely do as Fennec, why she's certainly a formidable partner for Boba Fett to have, recognizing just how smart she certainly is, how good of a fighter she is, and really deciding to go ahead and keep her on board. So I really like the story that we wind up getting. And also, the idea too here about the back to tank coming into play. His healing is complete. We've been seeing this guy in this back to tank for quite some time now throughout this series. And he's been trying to heal from the residual acid burns from the Sarlacc pit. I was kind of wondering exactly what it was, but once you see him trying to find his armor again and the failed attempt of finding it inside the Sarlacc, I love that Fennec comes through, pours some water on him, and you could see like homeboy's literally still burning. Like the acid is still like affecting his skin and kind of cutting through him and stuff and leaving really horrendous scars. So the idea of using the back to tank for such a long period of time definitely makes sense in the overall scheme of things as to why we've been seeing him in there. And I'm kind of hoping that maybe now that he's fully healed, maybe he'll definitely be back to the Boba Fett that we knew and love in the sense of hard hitting and visceral violence. You know what I mean? I'm not sure if that was certainly holding him back, but now that he's been out of the back to tank, he's probably feeling as best as he probably ever has. And so, I am kind of curious if to see if they're ever going to revisit how he found out that his armor was stolen, because I think he was clearly under the impression that the Sarlacc pit still devoured it, just knowing that the Tuskens certainly helped him out, having no idea that the Jawas wind up taking it off his body, if you will. So I'm kind of curious to know how he found out that it was the Jawas that wind up taking it at the end of the day. But overall, guys, I actually enjoyed this episode. Getting the opportunity to see Chrysanthemum again, I thought was pretty hilarious. I really love the scene of him at the bar and Madame Garza trying to kind of talk him down, but clearly to no avail, right? It definitely felt like he picks up the guy at the bar. One, I was kind of curious as to why he was fighting him in the first place. Clearly, he just got some pent up anger. Maybe the guy, all the people that were gambling and being loud, maybe they're just getting under his skin. Chrysanthemum feels like somebody that has a really short temper, if you will. And seeing him just demolish those guys was pretty funny. But even funnier in the sense of having Madame Garza, played by Jennifer Beal here, really try and talk him off the ledge. Like, hey, man, that level of violence is not as widely accepted as it certainly once was, right? Like times have certainly changed. And I love the fact that Chrysanthemum just doesn't give an F, right? Like maybe he does to a certain extent, because I honestly think that if Chrysanthemum didn't care, he probably would have ripped both arms out of the socket, right? Like that's what Wookiees are certainly known for. But the fact that he just pulled one arm out of the socket, maybe I felt like very much like he gets your point, Madame Garza, but you also need to get his point. And his point is, when I want to fight, when I want to do me, I'm going to do me. And nobody's going to tell me to certainly be any different. And I appreciate that. I appreciate that. So I really want to see this guy take that temper out on the Pikes within the next couple of episodes. So we'll see what winds up happening in here. But overall, I enjoyed this episode. I truly did. Got to see the opportunity for Boba in Slave One to go ahead and take out some of the speeder bike gang also, which visually, special effects wise, I thought that was pretty cool of seeing them on their speeders, and then you just see the Slave One ship coming up behind him before he just starts blasting them out of the sky, talking about getting some revenge. But I think him and Fennec both know at the end of the day, they're not the ones that burned down the Tusken group. Marcelino says Wookiees and Trandoshians, the reptiles, are natural enemies, hence why Chrysanthemum wanted to fight. Well, there you go. There's another explanation for sure. Just having sort of that grudge, natural enemies for sure will definitely makes anybody start fighting. Marcelino says, if anything can belong in Star Wars, does that mean we can get Dragon Ball Z fights with planets exploding and people getting super forms, human skin removing itself from the body and becoming a person? I mean, who knows what's happening now on the Outer Rim, man, right? Like I've never met anybody like that in Star Wars as of yet, but who's to say that something like that isn't lurking in the Outer Rim. And I think whenever you start, I mean, it might feel a little bit sort of out of place, but I think if you can have a really great sort of um backstory to it, I think you could probably pull off anything, honestly. And not so much level of Dragon Ball Z, but like I'm literally reading a book for the High Republic, and I believe it's the Rising Storm, and some Jedi literally just unleashed sort of this a massive amount of energy where he literally picked up an island and like chucked it through an enemy spacecraft, if you will, right? So like if a Jedi can do that, certainly in his prime, who knows what other alien creatures out there. I know you were certainly joking about skin stuff too, but I'm just simply stating, just because it doesn't necessarily feel like it fits doesn't necessarily mean it doesn't belong, right? And I think what we've seen so far from the Swoop Bike Gang in last week's episode, along with this, seeing that it's really kind of, I don't want to say like a trend, but it definitely seems like it's for a certain type of people. I can see I can see why it would fit in Tatooine the way that it certainly does. So just got to give everything a chance and opportunity for it to explain itself, because there's always backstory can explain everything. So but yeah, guys, overall I actually really enjoyed this week's episode for sure. But listen, at the end of the day, I definitely want to know your thoughts. What did you guys think about chapter number 4? Are you eager towards the finale as we get ever so close? Let your thoughts be known in the live chat or the comment section box below after this video airs. And other than that, guys, that's going to do it for us here. So we definitely will be back next Wednesday to definitely talk more Book of Boba Fett. So until then, do me a big favor as always. Take care of yourselves, take care of each other, and keep it A+. May the force be with you. I'll talk to you later. Bye.